Hello, hello. All right. Just giving it a minute for people to get caught up here because we're going to be starting very first screen. We're going to be going right into it. So, for those who've been watching for a while, this is going to be pretty interesting because it seems like a lot of the stuff we've been covering specifically has got, gained significance in the past little bit over the past Tisha Bob event here. So, going to be taking a look at that. All right, getting here to 2 minutes. Okay, so 28 days later. If you've been with me for a while, you understand we've been following this for a very long time. 28 days later, sunk up with the first event from the Super Bowl in the USA. So it's been a pretty big number for us, and all came off of this movie as the coronavirus took place. So we're going to be looking deeper into that as we go. But now, as the headline said, has that weird Simpsons prophecy week thing come to pass? If you're newer here, I'm going to play the clip for it. Then we're going to take a look at it because uh, it's pretty interesting how it takes place. If you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about because you're newer to the channel, you're going to have to watch the last little bit of videos in order to catch up to understand why this is significant. All right. This is a Simpsons clip explaining kind of the end of the world scenario and the return of Jesus. So here we go.
You're watching the Learning Network, where minds grow. Stay tuned for Apocalypse Week, Ebola Meteor, Nukes of Hazard, Jesus Christ Superstorm. But first, Nostradamus, the man who saw the future.
The following film, made in 1982, was thought to be lost forever. Actually, it was misplaced in a box for the comedy Dr. Detroit. But its predictions are more terrifying than ever. Hello, I'm Orson Welles, director of Citizen Kane.
Boring.
As well as the lower left-hand square on Hollywood Squares.
Ooh, right next to Ruth Buzzy.
In 1555, the prophet Nostradamus foretold a terrifying series of predictions, all of which came to pass. First, his own death. Second, large wars in Europe, similar to the large wars he observed in Europe, and the breakup of Fleetwood Mac. But Nostradamus' final quatrain contained one more prediction yet to come. But shortly after the Antichrist becomes president,
A flaming mushroom spreads across the sky.
the champagne is terrible. It tastes like dryer sheets. But what does said mushroom signify? Nothing less than World War III.
Who'd fall for this malarkey?
All right, so this is not the first time we've watched that. That's more of a refresher. So we're going to take a look at how Apocalypse Week is a Tisha B'Av event and how it's been blended in. It's not coming through very clear now, is it? There we go. All right, so we start with Nostradamus, the man who saw the future. Okay, so what is that referring to? Well, Nostradamus is a prophet, right? This guy who can see into the future. Well, it's pretty interesting that when we compare, biblically speaking, when you talk about Isaiah, well, Isaiah himself is referred to as the prophet. And it's pretty interesting because Isaiah died in the 7th century. It's pretty interesting because we just had a hurricane that was 7 days in length, whose name was Hurricane Isaias. Here's the meaning behind Hurricane Isaias' name. Well, it's a Spanish Latin derivative of the Hebrew name of Isaiah, which means my God is my salvation. So it's pretty fascinating that we get the Nostradamus prophet, the man who saw the future, who in biblical terms is the prophet, who is a 7th century, who died in 7th century BC, and now we get the hurricane Isaiah, who is a 7-day hurricane. So he lasted to the 7-day, which is pretty interesting because this all formed and took place during Tisha B'Av. Now, here's the meaning behind. Oh, sorry. Now, when we take a look at Hurricane Isaiah, we get some interesting numbers in correlation to what we were looking at with the Titan stuff. So, Hurricane Isaiah strengthened into a hurricane late August 3rd, just hours before it made landfall near Ocean Island Beach, North Carolina at 11:10 p.m. Now, that's very interesting because we were looking for some kind of event on August 3rd that would line up with the full sturgeon moon that would take place at 11:59 a.m. So it's pretty interesting because we have the August 3rd, we have the August 3rd, we have a difference in this timing of 12 hours and 49 minutes. Well, 49 minutes we're familiar with is the 7 times 7. 12 hours, well, 12 hours is equivalent to 432,000 seconds. That's a pretty interesting number because if you drop all those zeros, 432, well, 3011 is the 432nd prime, which gives us the 311, the March 11th, when the pandemic was called. It's also our 311, which we're quite familiar with as a signal. So we also see here that if we add up the 12 hours into minutes, we'll get the 720 minutes, and add the 49 minutes, we get a total of 769 minutes. Well, that's an interesting number as well because 769 is the 136th prime, which is interesting because 136 is the 16th triangular number, or 4 squared, which gives us 4, 4. And just as we got with the top, with the 49 minutes with our 7 squared, or our triangular 16, which gives us our 4 squared, we get our 711. So it's pretty interesting how that exact timing took place between the full sturgeon moon and Hurricane Isaiah. Pretty fascinating, considering that August 3rd also is the 216th day of the year. And 216 is the product of multiplying 6 times 6 times 6. So very interesting events and times taking place on this day. Very, very, very fascinating. Now, the full sturgeon moon is pretty neat because whoever named it associated it to the sun by giving it the 227 ordinal value, for that's a pi reference, 22 divided by 7. We also see 74. It's synonymous with Lucifer, Jesus, Jesus Christ, Messiah, the King, government, huge authority. 205, drop the 025, which is in the number, in the word 7. 79 is the 22nd prime. So the full sturgeon moon is very loaded. And starting off with that pi sun reference is very interesting because we've been looking at in the Greek mythology how Selene is the goddess of the moon and daughter of the Titans, and she is the sister of the god Helios, the sun. And so we get in the full sturgeon moon, we get the sun represented. And because it's the moon, we get the moon represented. So we get the Helios and Selene represented, the sun and the moon. And that was a very interesting thing because as we took a look through that trial that was associated with Donald Trump, he and Selene and the Kraken are all riddled together. So we were looking for that same riddle to come together. Why? Because even oh, yay, it stayed. Even at the start of the clip to where they release the Kraken in Clash of the Titans, the 2010 movie, we get both the moon and the sun represented. So it's a pretty fascinating thing because that's obviously the clip following is when they released the Kraken.
Brother, it is time for the mortals to pay. My child waits to do your will. Leave us. Release the Kraken!
And that's precisely what they did with Isaiah. All across the Carolina, everywhere, they released the Kraken. Absolutely fascinating how timed it is too, right? Like absolutely, absolutely perfectly timed and matched. The timing was a 7-11 between Isaiah, the prophet, and the releasing of the Kraken. It's very, very cool stuff. Like, again, I'm not saying cool like it's good, it's happening, but like whoever takes the time to sit down and write this stuff out, like, again, it was Walter Veith, I think I showed in a video explaining how these people who work for like the Simpsons and all these big giant corporation, multimedia and such, how they're all educated in the highest levels of philosophy, ancient religions, all these things that you wouldn't even think or consider to even associate to a child's cartoon, let alone a successful businessman. So it's fascinating that this stuff is riddled into this stuff, and there's no doubt about it. And when the first week, so when we're taking a look at this Simpsons riddle, and we know that the people behind it are the ones educated on this stuff in Kabbalah, numerology, and all these things, we see how, when we're going to take a look, so we saw already the prophet Isaiah used. Now we're taking a look at how they said the event one of Apocalypse Week will be a Ebola meteor. Well, we already know, we've all been going through this. That was March 11th, 311, when it became official from the World Health Organization. And it was all certified under the numbers 118,000, March 11th, 311. And that's no, that's that pandemic and hazard preparedness. It's legal. It's how they made it legal, introduced 118, became public law number 113, right? Like it's literally the same numbers, right? Like that's when it was released. Why? Because that's the law. And when we run the numbers from March 11th to our date of interest, so when the pandemic was released to October 18th, 2020, we can actually see how connected that date of October 18th, this year's 118, is with the 77, the 7 months and the 7 days, so our cube. We also get a pi reference. So the 31 weeks and 4 days, well, that's pi 3.145. And we just saw how that moon, the full sturgeon moon, has a pi reference in it as well, with 22 divided by 7. Like, these people don't mess around with this symbolism, and they stick to it. And then it's capped off with the span between the day that the World Health Organization called the pandemic is 221 days. Yes, the repeating 122. Now, after the coronavirus, we were supposed to experience some kind of nukes of hazard event. Well, the nukes of hazard event is absolutely interesting, because when we take a look at Apocalypse Week event 2, we find it mirrors last year's Tisha B'Av almost to the T. So last year we had the Russians with the radioactive isotopes that exploded in a bay, just the exact same thing that we're gonna see happening this year. And Russia identified that it was 4 radioactive isotopes from a nuclear accident 3 days before Tisha B'Av, which makes it August 8th, which is an 88. When we take a look, the Russian Nuclear Energy Company said the failure occurred in an isotope power source for a liquid-fueled rocket engine. So in there we get there was 7 killed by 4 radioisotopes. So there we get our 7-4, so our 711 again. We get our 88, and this happens 3 days before Tisha B'Av in 2019. Well, it's fascinating because Tisha B'Av this year, July 29th and 30th, which we're going to take a look at this connection with 7 days because we understand that, right? So July 24, 29th is interesting. It's also interesting to note that there is a game called 7 Days, which is a post-apocalyptic game. It's pretty interesting. But 7 days from July 29th, the start of Tisha B'Av, is August 4th. Well, that 7 days is interesting because that's when this became like a nuclear bomb. More than 2,700 injured in a Beirut explosion. U.S. President Donald Trump casts explosion as possible attack after blast near port kills at least 63. So we get the nuclear bomb, we get Trump commenting, and we get a 27 and a 63. Square, which represents in sacred geometry the 4 points, the 4 connectors, which is Yahweh, the tetragrammaton, is equal to 27 and 36 in Gematria, which is the 27 and the 63 in the headline. We also see that Lebanon, which Beirut is the capital of Lebanon, so we get our 63 and 36 in Lebanon, and we have it killing at least 63. So it's pretty interesting how they flashed their favorite numbers to associate with it, but they don't stop there. They implant the messages that they also need. So in a CNN article, we can see them saying it was like a nuclear explosion, so the same story. And Walid Abdo, a 43-year-old school teacher in the neighborhood of Beirut. So now with this, it's pretty interesting they give us a 43. So when we line this stuff all up again, we get the same old repeated numbers: Lucifer, nuclear Messiah, and now we get Isaiah put in there: 74s, 115s, and 43s. So it's pretty crazy. We get our 43 thrown into this explosion, this nuclear event. We see how we get our last year's event was the exact same thing with the 7 and 4. Same number system going on. And what are we talking about here? Uh, oh yeah, there's even from July 9th. So the days of Tammuz, the 3 weeks leading up to the official start of Tisha B'Av, when we run that to August 3rd, which was the day that Isaiah made landfall, even that's a 34, connecting back into the 34s and 43s, which brings us to the nukes of hazard. What did it do? What is it? Well, this is what it was, thanks to high impact vlogs.
Randomness. Let's see this one. Yeah. Okay. So look, there are charges going off, as though they're fireworks. Can you see that? We'll watch this a couple times. Love analyzing. Oh, look at that, man. Look at that. It's like it devoured everything. Holy mackerel, man. Holy mackerel. It's like it munched away everything in like 1,000 yards away. Wow, let's take a look at that again. That was pretty dramatic. That was even better because you can see what's happening to the ground. Watch this. See if I can stop it in time. Okay, so there's charges going off already in the thick smoke. Look at that. Look at that. I'm going to blow this up for you guys. Pacific Northwest Bear, can you drop that link again so people can see this for themselves? Look at that. Look at that.
Now, what's also neat in there is if you can find images of this, you can actually see that there's no doubt that there is a bomb hitting and impacting. So this was a definitely some kind of something was dropped on it.
Wow. And let the show begin. Look at that. Look at that. Blocks out the sun momentarily with it's like water vapor, and then it disappeared. What kind of bomb is that? That's and then it just turns to cloud and evaporates. Guys, what is that? I'm no by no means a bomb expert. What do you make of that? If you have a phone, you got a camera, and usually it's a high resolution camera. If you can hold it steady, you can get some really good shots. This has 3 million views. Here we go. This is from a different perspective in the different part of Beirut. Look at that. Wow. Wow, you can almost determine the let's do the second mark here. Let's do this.
So that was the 2020 Beirut explosions. On the evening of August 4th, which is interesting because 7 days after August 4th is August 11th. So 811, last year's Tisha B'Av. A series of explosions occurred at the port city of Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Now we're going to just take a look at these numbers and let them stand for themselves. So in it, we get our 157 deaths, which is the 37th prime. We get 5,000 injuries, which when we drop that down to 5, we get the Pentagon. 50, we get a Jubilee. 500, we get the life of the Phoenix. So it's very interesting that they throw in that 50, which we're very familiar with in this study. We also get with the U.S., who spent 10 to 15 billion in property damage, that's 115, which is our Messiah. When we also continue on, we see that estimated 300,000 people being made homeless. Well, 300 is Shin. We also can see it's 1155 tonnage of TNT impact. We also see that there's 2750 tons. Well, 1777 is the 2750th prime, and they translate that into 3030 short tons. So that's 33. So we're getting our perfect 777s, our Messiah, and then even down at the bottom here, the blast was detected by the U.S. Geological Survey with a magnitude of 33, or a 3.3, and the Lebanese government declared a 2-week state of emergency. Well, 1 week is 7 days, 2 weeks is 2 sevens, so 77, well, that's in cube. So we get our Messiah, we get our sacrifice, we get the Shin, which is the devouring, the destruction. So it's very fascinating with all the 1s and the 5s that are going on, and mathematically represented is pretty interesting because in Gematria, 55 is in both God and heaven. 11, well, that's our L reference. And we also get 11, which is the 5th prime. Well, 55 factors are 5 and 11, and the divisors of 55 are 1, 5, 11, and 55. There's a very special correlation between 55 and 11, and this whole article is a nod to it, throwing out some 77s, rounding out this picture of a Jesus Christ sacrifice. So it's pretty fascinating. We also get how they follow it up on August 6th, and they take a look at this. This is now the end. So on August 5th is pretty interesting because that's the day that Hurricane Isaias ended. Okay, so we have this going off August 4th. We have the Beirut explosion. August 5th, we have the end of the Isaiah. And then on August 6th, we get this write-up on the events up to and leading for August 6th. At the Beirut explosion rocks Lebanon's capital city. Well, 86 is interesting. 8 is August, the 8th month. Because 86 always has some kind of association to death because it's in blood sacrifice and human sacrifice. Well, we just take a look at all those Messiah references in the 84, right, on the August 4th. Well, when we take a look at on the 86th, well, blood and human sacrifice, we know that Jesus was the human and blood sacrifice, and he was the Messiah. And with all those 33s on the last one, and in this, they say at least 137 people were killed and 5,000 wounded. Well, 137 is the 33rd prime. So we have all the Messiah talk, we have the human and blood sacrifice, and we have the age of the victim, which is 33. So we have a Tisha B'Av ceremony sacrifice in the almost exact same manner that we had last year going on at the same time with Tisha B'Av. Now, when we take a look at the start of Tisha B'Av, it was July 29th, and we got these numbers for the coronavirus pandemic, which is 1771, 11.7, and our 666 and our 810. Well, 7 days later, which is August 6th, which is this point where they did the Jesus sacrifice, on August 6th, we get the coronavirus cases of 18, 999, 962, 711, and 622. Well, that's pretty fascinating. If we just focus on those numbers for 1 second, 18, 999, 18, 999. And the top is all 711, just like the bottom is all 711. It's absolutely fascinating. Is that not the most crazy, luck of the, luck of the draw there? The exact numbers in that exact time span? And now, what's also interesting is when we take a look at the rest of the numbers that are now new to that, we get a 962 and a 622. So a 962, if we rearrange it so the 6 goes onto the one side and the 2 goes onto the other side, we're left with a 666 and a 222. So that's what was added to the already 666, 810, and the 711s. So it's absolutely fascinating that the coronavirus is timed up numerically and to the date with a Jesus Christ sacrifice ritual. At the same time, they are playing out an Isaiah destruction Kraken ritual. It's absolutely crazy. And then don't forget that we had the Eminem warning of this from Dr. Detroit. He was that nuclear symbol, and we're looking for some kind of event circulating around it. And we got that through a lot of stuff, him being the 117 and currently age 47. And he gave us this. All right, so the day after the 86th, we get a report coming out on the 87 where Israel has demolished 313 Palestinian homes in the West Bank. That's absolutely fascinating. The timing is unreal. Like it's so unreal. Like 313, and that's the number they pick. And then we get the event 201 from October 18th. The George Floyd's death is a 313 with a 77. And the 313 it itself is the 65th prime. And George Floyd and both quarantined equals 65. And this Palestinian colonization and West and the Wall Resistance Commission have confirmed that Israeli forces have demolished 313 homes in the occupied West Bank. Like that's pretty fascinating considering that. And then they go to say that the commission disclosed in a report that 64% of demolitions took place in East Jerusalem. 64 as in God's chosen and chosen. So that's what was chosen to happen. It's unbelievable. According to the report, the Israeli authorities have issued 129 eviction notices requiring 737 Palestinians to temporarily vacate their homes. Well, that's a neat little game they're playing there because 129 eviction notices requiring 737 people to leave. Well, 727 is the 129th prime. So we get a 727 and a 737 reference back to back, and we're supposed to take that as coincidence. We're also supposed to take the 737 reference with all this referencing we've seen going on to the Titans and the Clash of the Titans and how Trump is associated to this. And here we take a look, and we saw this before when the Pegasus was associated to the 737 breakup of the Pegasus Airlines Boeing 737-800 when it overran the runway and broke up. And Trump and Pegasus and Judge and Russian all had the 25s. Trump and Pegasus have the overlap numerically, and this took place on February 5th, which was the 25. Well, isn't it fascinating to note that also on August 7th, there was a 737 with 18 dead. 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. It's exactly the same. It's absolutely unbelievable how much they use this symbolism numerically, and then physically it happens too. So these timings, there's rituals going on. Nobody's going to ever be able to tell you why. We're able to track this stuff and track it pretty specifically now, as you can see. And this is twice now the Pegasus 737 reference has come up in relation to a down 737 Boeing. And another reference here to the 666. It's also interesting because the plane itself is called the Boeing 7, so it's actually just given the number IX. So that's its actual number, and then it's given some other call number. So it's plane IX. And when you put that in, we get the interesting numbers of 33, 21, and 12. Well, that's pretty fascinating set of numbers there, because obviously with the 33 and the Jesus reference, 21 is a fascinating number in this specifically because it's 7 plus 7 plus 7. We also get 12, and 12 is 4 plus 4 plus 4. So we get our three sets of 11, 7, 11, 7, 11, 7, 11, right? Isn't that crazy that that's the Boeing, that's the 737? And when you take that 21 and 12 and squish them together, you get our 2112, another version, an augmentation of the 1122, the 737, the Pegasus, the Titan symbolism. Continuing on Tisha B'Av. And talking about Trump, who pops up at this exact same time, who says, I have a lot of enemies. This may be the last time you see me for a while. I have a lot of very rich enemies. They're not happy with what I'm doing, but I figure we have one chance to do it. No other president is going to do what I do. And we have 1.7 million views when this is published, which is the 7th prime. And again, it's a 33-second video, 733. Is that what our nuclear messiah was talking about? Is why he's going into hiding? Well, the Simpsons said that the coming World War III, when we see a flaming mushroom cloud spreading across the sky, just like we did. Did the Simpsons prophecy take place? Because if it did, that means what's coming up is going to be the Jesus Christ Superstorm. Mr. Joseph Gregory Hallett. So it's pretty interesting when we take some of these numbers and associate them to understand why it's always moving forward. This whole system is always moving forward. Because on August 4th, the date of the bombing, to August 18th, our date of interest, the 1/18/2020 date, was 441 days. Well, that's also pretty interesting because when we take a look at this, we get the number 1 year and 75 days. Well, that's the product of 25 times 7. That's pretty interesting because 7 is involved in there, considering that we get the 14 months and the 14 days. Well, that's the reference to the 28, the perfect number 28 with the 2 in each hand, the 14 in each hand of phalanges. 14 again is also representative of 7 plus 7, our 7 squared. So our 77 is back in there, our 63, the Lebanons, and the 441. And the 441 is interesting because that means the hour of his judgment has come, and that those who follow the Lamb and judgment and pale horse, and we've seen these numbers associated to New Orleans. And on Revelation chapter 14:4, where it talks about the people who are judging and the Lamb and ruling and reigning. This is all set up to take place based off the 28 that we just went over and explained to come to understand why these numbers are significant, and they've all become very, very, very significant. Now remember this symbolism, right? That we took a look at with this weird hazard crop circle that appeared with the Templar symbol in the middle, which shows the negatives of a biohazard symbol. Remember 28 days later? 28, the perfect number of creation, of biohazard. It's absolutely incredible. Day 1 exposure, day 3 infection, day 8 epidemic, day 15 evacuation, day 20 devastation. And 28 days later was released on November 1st, 2020. Well, that's the first day of the 11th month of the 22nd day, 11/22, with a running time of 113 minutes. This is the timeline that they laid out for us. November 11th, 2002 to February 18th was 17 years, 3 months, and 17 days. The Pegasus. And what took place on February 18th? That's when the lockdown of China took place. Hundreds of millions living under the coronavirus lockdown. And when we run from the 28 perfect day, the 28 perfect creation, from the release of 28 days later to March 11th, the lockdown of the world, 17 years, 4 months, and 11 days. That's right, the perfect 7, 11, and 4. Our 7 and 4 gives us our 28, and our 7 and 4 our El Shaddai. It's unbelievable how perfectly synced this is. When we run from the releasing of the 28 days later to George Floyd's death, is 210 months and 33. 210, drop the zeros, 21. 7 plus 7 plus 7. And when we run again up to October 18th, our date of interest from 28 days later, the perfect creation of this perfect pandemic event we're going through, is 7/11/7. The numerological associations and timings is unbelievable. The probabilities of lining this many 7/11s up perfectly with these events is it's unreal. So there's no way it's by chance. These days are picked and purposed and synced with astrological timings in order for the Kabbalists to get the right this and that for themselves to feel secure in this world. It's pretty sad that you have to line all this stuff up so that you can feel important. It's very interesting. November 1st to March 11th. So from the release of 28 days later to the day the World Health Organization declared the the world a pandemic, the coronavirus a pandemic, was 208 months and 11 days. So with that, we get a 20 and an 8/11. The exact same numbers appear when you run that start of 28 days later to the Great Conjunction of December 21. So when they hit all these dates with all these numbers that we've been tracking for almost a year, and every one of these dates has happened, and November 11th we tracked to March 11th, which was the day the whole world became pandemicized, we were 28/11. The exact same numbers are coming up for the Great Conjunction, a 21/11. So why isn't something going to happen then? They have to do it. They're bound to these numbers. These events, they've been looking for, it's obvious they've been looking forward to them for a very long time because they're syncing all of their moves to that. November 1st, and the Contagion, back a few videos ago, we ran the numbers given to us from the movie Contagion, which suggests to us that June 5th, 2021 will be the end of this event. Well, when we take 28 days later and we run that to June 5th, 2021, we get 18 years, 7 months, and 4 days. 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, and our 7 plus 4, 11. The key to El Shaddai, 7 times 4, 28, the perfect number, which is 28 days later. It gives us 18 years, 216 days. 18 is 6 plus 6 plus 6. 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. It gives us 223 months and 4 days. Well, 223 is the skull and bones reverse, but it's also Genesis 3:22, where we hear about the tree of life, and for representing Yahweh in the Tetragrammaton, we get the tree of life and God. We get Satan. We get the number of the beast, rather, not Satan. We get number of the beast twice. We get Yahweh. We get the tree of life. We also get these weird primes. 971 is the 164th prime, and 6791 is the 874th prime. The mathematical chances that there's this many interesting associations just staggers me, just accidentally. So it just seems like everything is lining up perfect. And maybe it's because, just as their banner says, 28 days later, the days are numbered. This thing's all been laid out. It's all been laid out and all foretold and all told to us through this propaganda. 28 days has been timed, right? The days are numbered. 28 days, well, that's the equivalent of 40,320 minutes. 432, well, 3011 is the 432nd prime, drop the zeros. Well, isn't that fascinating? Because that was the exact same time signature we saw taking place between the full sturgeon moon and the coming of Isaiah. 12 hours, which was 432,000 seconds, which is the 432nd number again. It's unbelievable. 28 days is 672 hours. 5011 is the 672nd prime. And Saturn is 511. But so is Lucifer, Nuclear, Messiah, and now Isaiah. Now we await the coming Jesus Christ superstorm. If the Simpsons prophecies are correct, and so far every single thing that they said is going to happen has happened in this Tisha B'Av event cycle. This December 21st, big conjunction is going to be something special. And the hell week of October, when we start on October 16th, or what would it be? Yes, October 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20, 21, and 22 is going to be a massive, massive streak of events. We're going to see that played out in November again, with the November 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th, 18th, and 19th, 20, 21. So there's 2 huge stretches of these exact numbers coming up, and they're relevant this year. Not because I say they're relevant, not because truthers everywhere, here or there, say anything's relevant. It's relevant because, as I've shown, they've plastered these numbers all over the place. All I've done is take them, put them up into a group so that we can see them, not scattered abroad. And it's a pretty convincing pile of repetitive scenarios and numbers, the exact same nuclear thread. Now, the question here for me is, was this the event of the Simpsons that they were talking about? Because they obviously were talking about it with the Ebola meteor. They were talking about the coronavirus situation, so they're talking about this plague issue. And then they were talking about the nuke issue in the plague issue, which we kind of went through. So we're going through this stuff. Or are these all just small, tiny precursors to a really big version of this coming? And that's what I'm waiting for. because I still think Seattle has some very interesting propaganda timings and numbers plastered all over the place for this. So a little bit of an 88 being August 8th today gift with this video. Didn't really have time, just saw all these events coming together and had to put it up. So and I thought all those people following this for the past few would find it pretty interesting, because I find it pretty interesting how all those events just seem to come together so perfectly yet again. Those Simpsons writers, they just seem to get everything right. So I'm gonna shut her down there. Appreciate all the time you guys give coming to watch my stuff and placing comments. I do really appreciate it, especially all the kind words. In the world that we live in, the kind words do such a blessing. So awesome to all you guys, and wherever you are, I hope this finds you well. God bless.